The armor monsters are a class of monster like spirits, Geminis, and unions that are used by Valon, and yet another example of a deck from the Doma arc that has yet to see a card game adaptation. This though makes a modicum of sense because you just know people are gonna start throwing hands the moment these ever get released, because the armor monsters are not like typical monsters. In the anime, they equip directly to the duelist using them, allowing Valon to fight his opponent's monsters with his own fists. The real genius here is Kaiba Corp's solid vision, allowing a player to interact with holograms. The premise of this deck isn't venturing too far. There are a number of armor monsters and cards, so the trick is how to adapt them. If you peruse the web for people's takes on armor monsters, you'll find everything under the sun. From unions to equips, from having a centerpiece monster to having a centerpiece token to having the head act as the centerpiece, and so on and so forth. Where I've landed, and where probably many people land, is creating a new class of monster called Armor. By class of monster, I'm referring to monsters like Geminis, Unions, Toons, Spirits, Tuners, Flip, those classes. Armor is a new class. Now, due to the limitations on Dueling Book and not being able to create that new class, instead each monster will just have an all caps Armor in their name, so other cards can easily reference them without ambiguity. But the intention is to make them their own class. And so the question is, what is the distinguishing aspect of this class? For example, unions equip to others, Geminis double normal summon to become effect monsters, spirit monsters can't be special summon and bounce back to the hand at the end phase. For armor, the first thing is that you can only control one of each monster. This applies to all the monsters. And then the other aspect is dividing the armors into three categories: engine, defense, and offense. And each of these will have a defining characteristic that is unique not only to armors, but among each category of armor. To that end, this showcase will be a bit different because instead of going monsters, spells, traps, I'm instead going to show them in batches. We have the engine batch, the cards that make the deck go, the offense pieces, which are the armor monsters that you can use to launch attacks, and then the defense pieces, which are the armor monsters that you use to protect your board. The engine cards make the deck go. These are the cards that will search armor cards or get armor monsters on your board. They consist of two monsters and all the spells and traps. The two monsters are Psychic Armorhead and Double Cloth Armor. Psychic Armorhead nabs you a search of an armor monster from your deck on normal summon, and during your draw phase you can give up your normal draw to retrieve it from your grave to hand. So those are the two effects similar to the anime counterpart. Where it differs is the addition of the third effect, where you can special summon any number of level 4 or lower monsters from your hand. Double Cloth can be brought out from your hand or grave anytime a level 4 or lower armor monster you control is destroyed in battle. And if it's around at the end of the battle phase, you can banish it to special summon any number of level 4 or lower armor monsters from your grave. But if your opponent wants to get rid of it in battle and they attack it, it'll inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attacking monster's attack, then destroy both monsters. Now we have the two spells that mass special summon from the deck, Armored Gravitation and Full Armor Gravitation. Both of these cards can bring out 4 to 5 armor monsters in exchange for you not being able to summon non-armor monsters for the turn. The idea here being that in order for the armor monsters to function at their highest potential, you need a lot of them on board. But I also don't want to turn this deck into an engine for plays unrelated to the armor archetype. Armor Gravitation works if you have no monsters, special summoning 4 level 4 or lower armor monsters with different names from your deck, so they are sent to the grave during the end phase. Full Armor excavates the top 5 cards of your deck and summons any armor monsters in the order that they were revealed, with the remaining cards being shuffled into the deck. Next up are the spell and traps that summon armor monsters from your grave, Phoenix Gravitation and Magnet Armor. Phoenix summons up to 4 armors from the grave, but they go back to the grave in the end phase. Magnet only summons 1, though it doesn't get sent back. Magnet also has a search effect letting you grab any of the previous gravitation cards by banishing it and 1 to 5 armor monsters from your grave. The caveat is that you can only summon monsters for the rest of the turn up to the number you banished. And finally, we have Data Brain, which solves a couple of issues with the deck. First is that it boosts the equipped armor monster's attack and defense by 1,000 for every armor monster you control, giving the deck a much needed power boost since it otherwise relies on burning for damage. The other is allowing you to fetch armor monsters on your opponent's turn, specifically triggering when your opponent summons a monster by sending itself to the grave to grab any armor from your deck. It's essentially my way of reenacting how in the anime, Data Brain takes on the form of Rocket Hermos Cannon. The utility here is being able to access whichever armor monster you need to answer whatever your opponent just put out. The final effect of this card is that it adds itself back to your hand from the grave if you add Psychic Armorhead with its effect back to your hand from the grave. So to summarize the engine, Psychic Armorhead and Magnet Armor have searching effects, Psychic Armor Head summons from the hand, Double Cloth Armor, Phoenix Gravitation, and Magnet Armor summon from the grave, and Armored Gravitation, Full Armor Gravitation, and Data Brain summon from the deck. The shared aspects about the offense pieces is that A, they all gain 200 attack for every armor monster you control, B, they can't attack if another armor monster has attacked that turn, and C, for most of them you need another armor monster on board to activate and resolve their effect. That second bit simulates the idea of you wearing the armor because you are essentially one monster, so you can only attack once. The 6 offense pieces are Big Bang Blow, Burning Knuckle, Buster Pile, Trap Buster, and Overboost. Big Bang Blow at the start of the damage step if it battles inflicts damage to you equal to the total attack of monsters you control, then does the same to your opponent based on their monsters, then blows up all monsters on the board. Burning Knuckle at the start of the damage step if it battles will inflict 400 damage to your opponent for each card they control. Buster Knuckle after damage calculation having attacked a defense position monster will inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's defense. Buster Pile can't be destroyed by battle and after damage calculation will negate the effects of the monster it battled then destroy it. Trap Buster at the start of the damage step when it battles will pop spells and traps your opponent controls up to the number of other armor monsters you control. And Overboost will allow your armor monsters to attack directly and prevent your opponent from attacking spells and traps in battles involving armor monsters. But if you inflict direct damage with his effect, then he's destroyed at the end of the battle phase. So to summarize, you have 2 ways to blow up your opponent's monsters, 3 ways to deal burn damage, 1 way to pop back row, and 1 way to attack directly. The defining characteristic of the defense pieces is that none of them can attack, but they also have the effect that when an armor monster you control is targeted for an attack, you can change the target to another armor monster you control instead. In the anime, I believe most if not all the armor monsters have this effect, but for here it's just reserved for the defenders and essentially simulates this idea that you're wearing the armor, and if your opponent tries to attack you, you can shift your body to whichever part you want them to hit. The 4 defense pieces are Active Guard, Black Hole Shield, Advanced Shield, and Jet Gauntlet. Active Guard reduces any battle damage you take in battles involving armor monsters to 0, though it pops itself in the end phase of a turn in which you apply this effect. Also, each turn, the first time an armor monster you control would be destroyed by an opponent's card, it is not destroyed. Advanced Shield protects your other armor monsters from being targeted by card effects, and if another armor monster you control would be destroyed, you can destroy this one instead. Black Hole Shield can be triggered anytime your opponent activates a monster effect, tributing itself to negate your opponent's monster effects on the current chain up to the remaining number of armor monsters you control. So in a sense like a black hole, it sucks up all your opponent's monster effects. And Jet Gauntlet has a mandatory trigger when your opponent special summons a monster or monsters by destroying itself, then destroying those opponent's monsters that were summoned. So to summarize the defense, you have a battle damage reducer, 2 destruction preventions, targeting protection, effect negator, and special summon destroyer. Alright, now to go through some of the combos and interactions with the armor deck. So like I said, you've got a few different engine cards to get your armor monsters going to bring them out in mass. For example, Armored Gravitation lets you grab any 4 from your deck. Since they get sent to the grave though, this isn't the best go first card though. If you wanted, you can set up your Psychic Armor Head in the grave to retrieve it during your next draw phase, or also set up effects that summon from the grave like Phoenix, Magnet Armor, Double Cloth Armor for ensuing turns. But especially going second, you can bring forth whichever armor monster makes sense. Bring out, for example, Black Hole if you want to be able to negate your opponent's monster effects. If your opponent has a bunch of back row, you want to bring out the Trap Buster. If your opponent has something that has destruction protection, you can bring out Buster Pile to be able to negate its effects and then destroy it. Or if your opponent just has a bunch of different monsters on board, you could bring out the Big Bang Blow to be able to get rid of all monsters on the board. And then like how this deck was presented, you have defensive pieces and offensive pieces. Typically you want a good mix between them so you can put pressure on your opponent. For example, having Active Guard will be able to protect your monsters from destruction and keep you from losing life points in battle when you redirect attacks to whichever monster you want to redirect them to. Armor Advanced Shield protects your monsters from targeting. Black Hole Shield will be able to negate effects. Trap Buster will be able to destroy spells and traps your opponent controls. Jet Gauntlet would be able to destroy any monster your opponent special summons. And those are just one combination. Buster Pile is always a good one to have. Big Bang Blow can be good if your opponent has a lot of monsters. It kind of depends on the situation how you want to play your armor monsters. One more combo for the road. You open up with Psychic Armorhead on normal summon, grabs an armor monster from the deck. Let's grab really any of the attackers. I'll go with Trap Buster if I can find him. Use Psychic Armorhead's other effect to special summon any number of armor monsters in your hand. So again, now we got our Destruction Prevention, Targeting Protection, Monster Effect Negator, and Trap Buster and Overboost are the offense pieces we have on the board, so they will both gain 200 attack for every armor monster that we control. So that'll jump up to 1,000. Trap Buster jumps up to 1,000. Equip Data Brain to Trap Buster, so he will increase his attack and defense by 1,000 for every armor monster that we control, so that's another 5,000. And thanks to Overboost, we can attack directly, and during that turn, not only would Trap Buster destroy up to 4 spells and traps our opponent controls, but Overboost would prevent our opponent from even activating spell and trap cards when our armor monster battles. So right here, we can attack for 6k directly. So those are some go-to combos and interactions with the armor archetype. So that does it for the armor custom archetype. Much like Valon and Joey's duel, this deck is very much playing the grind game. You use the engine to bring out whichever offense pieces you need to reduce your opponent's resources, while you use the defense pieces to protect yours. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe because next week, it's time to awaken the dragons.